The spring of 1888 had been a cruel tease across the Montana Territory. It was late May, and a sudden savage snowstorm had swept down from the Rockies, blanketing the prairie in a silent, blinding white. Inside the tiny, isolated telegraph office in the railhead town of Three Forks, Elias Thorne, a man whose patience was as thin as his dwindling whiskey supply, stared out at the swirling white hell. He was a surveyor, a man used to measuring and mapping the untamable land, but this storm had trapped him. He needed to get to Helena with a set of geological maps that promised to make his mining consortium a fortune, or leave them ruined. Elias was a man carved from the same hard rock he charted, lean, stern, and entirely alone. He didn't believe in luck, only in careful calculation and a reliable firearm. Right now, both seemed useless against nature's fury. The only other person in the office was the telegrapher, an old man named Jedediah, who mostly slept by the stove. The rhythmic tap-tap-tap of the key was the only sound of life connecting their frozen outpost to the living world. Suddenly, the tapping stopped. Jedediah's eyes snapped open. "Hold on, mister. Got a long one coming through. Looks like a coated private wire." Elias watched, his jaw tight. A moment later, Jedediah slid a slip of paper across the counter. The message was terse, sent from the bustling, lawless streets of Butte. H.L. Thorne. Urgent. Your sister's child.
Cora Belle didn't wait for an invitation. She stepped inside the telegraph office, the blast of icy wind instantly filling the small room before she quickly slammed the door shut. She stood dripping melting snow onto the rough wooden floor, her rifle held loosely in one hand. Elias instinctively moved away from the counter, putting distance between himself and the unexpected visitor. His hand rested near the butt of the pistol tucked into his belt. "You haven't answered my question," he said, his voice cold and flat, mirroring the air. "Who are you, and why have you come for me? I don't know any Cora Belle." She gave a small, humorless smile, the severity of her face briefly softened by the movement. "Of course you don't. You only know the land, Mr. Thorne. I know the people in it. And right now the people you need to worry about are the ones who sent that wire." She gestured toward the crumpled paper in his hand. Elias unfolded the message, his eyes narrowing. R.L. Who is R.L.? "A lawyer. A frightened one. He's holding your sister's estate in Butte, and your niece. He wired you because your brother-in-law, Arthur, has defaulted on a serious debt, a debt to a man who believes he is owed more than money." "Arthur's debts are his own. I washed my hands of that gambler years ago," a scoff, looking away. "And a niece. I told you, I have no kin." "The girl's name is Amelia, and the man Arthur owes is named Silas Kincaid." The name hit Elias with the force. Cora Belle didn't wait for an invitation. She stepped inside the telegraph office, the blast of icy wind instantly filling the small room before she quickly slammed the door shut. She stood dripping melting snow onto the rough wooden floor, her rifle held loosely in one hand. Elias instinctively moved away from the counter, putting distance between himself and the unexpected visitor. His hand rested near the butt of the pistol tucked into his belt. "You haven't answered my question," he said, his voice cold and flat, mirroring the air. "Who are you, and why have you come for me? I don't know any Cora Belle." She gave a small, humorless smile, the severity of her face briefly softened by the movement. "Of course you don't. You only know the land, Mr. Thorne. I know the people in it. And right now the people you need to worry about are the ones who sent that wire." She gestured toward the crumpled paper in his hand. Elias unfolded the message, his eyes narrowing. R.L. Who is R.L.? "A lawyer. A frightened one. He's holding your sister's estate in Butte, and your niece. He wired you because your brother-in-law, Arthur, has defaulted on a serious debt. A debt to a man who believes he is owed more than money. Arthur's debts are his own. I washed my hands of that gambler years ago. A scoff, looking away. And a niece. I told you, I have no kin. The girl's name is Amelia, and the man Arthur owes is named Silas Kincaid. The name hit Elias with the force of a physical blow. Silas Kincaid, the most ruthless railroad baron and land speculator west of the Mississippi, a man who crushed anyone who stood in his way. He wasn't owed money, he was owed land, specifically the very tracts that Elias had just finished surveying for his consortium. Kincaid had been trying to acquire those maps and the rich copper deposits they detailed for months. Kincaid, Elias breathed. What does he want? He doesn't want money. He wants control of the estate, which includes the deed to your sister's old cabin, a cabin that happens to sit directly on the south fork of the Blackfoot River, right where your maps show the best copper veins begin. Kincaid is using the child as collateral. Pay the debt or he takes everything, including the girl, claiming she's an orphan, wards of the state. Elias looked down at the map tube, then at the ferocious storm outside. The maps were his life's work, his fortune, but Kincaid was using a child, his blood, to force his hand. How do you know all this? He demanded. Cora Belle pulled the collar of her coat up higher. Because I work for Kincaid, or I did. He hired me to track the child and secure the property, but Kincaid's methods, she paused, her gaze flat and steady, they no longer sit well with me. I've switched sides, Mr. Thorne. I'm taking you to Amelia before Kincaid's men get there. And what's your bargain? Elias asked, knowing nothing came free in the Montana Territory. My silence and the knowledge I have. In exchange, I need safe passage out of the territory and $1,000. It's the only way you'll beat Kincaid's men, and the only way I'll escape his retribution. We travel now, or you lose the child and the land. The blizzard raged outside, a clock ticking down their opportunity. Elias looked at the fierce woman, the compromised messenger, and the unforgiving storm. He had a fortune in his hand and a burden on his conscience. He had to choose. All right, Cora Belle, Elias said, pulling his coat tight. Now how do we get out of this town?
Elias Thorne checked his watch. It was just past midnight. Kincaid's men would arrive on the fastest train from Butte, and once they reached Three Forks, they would make a swift dash toward his sister's cabin. He only had a few hours. You have a pistol, Mr. Thorne, Cora Belle said quietly, as if reading his mind. But Kincaid has hired a dozen men. We will be on a sleigh, and we will be alone. Your sleigh, Elias observed sharply, is pulled by a mule that will be winded before we travel 2 miles in this storm. And what I prepared for Helena was a freight train. He gently patted the map tube. Cora gave a cold smile with her icy eyes. Would I have worked for Kincaid if my plan relied on a mule? My real transport is hidden behind the station, obscured by the snow. Elias looked at her with disbelief. Cora Belle opened the door and motioned for him to follow her into the fierce wind outside. Before they left together, Elias handed the telegraph operator, Jedediah, a pouch of dollars. Jedediah, you forget everything you just saw. If anyone asks about me, tell them I took the train east, Elias said in a stern voice. Jedediah, his eyes gleaming at the sight of the dollars, nodded in agreement. I haven't seen you, Mr. Thorne. I've been asleep for the last 3 hours. Through the snow, they walked toward a small shed behind the station. Cora broke the lock with her rifle butt. Inside the shed,
a pair of beautiful, strong ski sleds waited, each pulled by two large, trained Alaskan Malamutes. The dogs were wrapped in warm hides and were ready for a fast journey through the snow. "These are from the Canadian border people," Cora explained, as she quickly tied Elias's bag and map tube to the back sleigh. "They are faster than horses, and the snow doesn't tire them." "How did you acquire them?" Elias asked, quickly checking his pistol. "I didn't acquire them, Mr. Thorne," she said, her eyes fixed on Elias. "I rented them. Now get on. I will drive the front one, you follow on the second sleigh. Hold the handles tight, and no matter what happens, do not leave the path." Elias climbed on to the second sleigh. This unexpected journey, this dangerous companion, and the burden of an unknown child written into his fate, everything combined to drag him into an adventure for which he was never prepared. Cora Belle gave a sharp whistle. The four powerful dogs lunged onto the snow. The Malamutes were almost silent, only their thick paws making soft sounds on the snow. The first sleigh quickly disappeared into the darkness, and then Elias's sleigh followed. The fierce wind whipped against their faces, but Elias realized that this vehicle was indeed fast, and it moved steadily through the storm. Instead of following the railway, they turned south toward the Blackfoot River. This route was rugged, but Kincaid's men would not take this path with horses or ordinary sleighs. For nearly an hour, they raced in complete silence, broken only by the wail of the wind and the friction of the wood. Suddenly, Cora Belle stopped her sleigh. Elias quickly pulled up alongside her. "What is it?" Elias whispered. "We have entered Kincaid's territory now," Cora warned. "But before that—" She got off her sleigh and knelt on the ground to examine something. Elias felt as though Cora was testing him. Was she only after his money in this whole deal, or was there something more behind it? "I am not trustworthy, Mr. Thorne," Cora said calmly, as if she had heard his question. "I am with you because I don't want to be Kincaid's servant, and I need my money. If you want to shoot me, then wait. If we can't reach Amelia, then your map and your niece both will be useless to me." Elias took his hand away from the pistol grip. He had only one chance. "What are you waiting for?" Elias asked. Cora swiftly raised her rifle and aimed it at a tree far away in the snow. Boom! The sound of the rifle shattered the silence of the snow. A man who had been hiding in the tree cried out and fell into the snow. "Your assurance," Cora said, reloading the rifle. "Kincaid's men. They're looking for us." The sound of the rifle shot intensified the horror of the blizzard. Elias Thorne saw that the man who fell in the snow was one of Kincaid's hired guns. This meant Kincaid had correctly guessed Elias would head for his sister's cabin and had posted men along the way. Cora Belle wasn't just seeking freedom for money, she was actively helping Elias. "We have no time," Cora Belle said crisply, her eyes scanning the snowy darkness. "They will arrive quickly, and if they took this route, there will be at least 3 of them." "And you just took out one," Elias said, raising his pistol. "No, I only wounded him," Cora replied, pointing toward the sleigh. "We run now. If they follow, you hold them off." At the sharp sound of Cora's whistle, the Malamute dogs bolted across the snow again. Elias's sleigh followed, his pistol ready. Within a minute, the faint sound of 2 horses' hooves and indistinct human shouts could be heard from behind. "They're coming!" Elias yelled. Cora Belle commanded while driving the sleigh. "Look left, a large fir tree. We stop there." They stopped the sleigh in the shelter of the massive fir tree. Cora swiftly handed her rifle to Elias. "Stay here. The branches will give you cover from the snow. I will go for Amelia. All I need is for you to hold them for 1 minute." Elias had no time for hesitation. He was forced to trust Cora. Hiding himself behind the snow cover, he looked through the rifle sight.
3 men on horseback were approaching across the snow, following the sleigh tracks. They were only 20 yards away. Elias aimed and fired. Boom! A horse's leg gave out. The man screamed and was pinned underneath the animal. The second man, being experienced, quickly leapt from his horse and took cover in the snow. The third fired at Elias. The bullet struck a tree branch. Seizing this confusion, Cora Belle spun her sleigh around and, leaving Elias, quickly vanished into the snow in the opposite direction. Elias thought Cora had betrayed him. She had left him alone to face Kincaid's men and fled with her sleigh, Amelia, and Elias's maps. Their bargain was broken. Just then, he saw the faint light of Amelia's cabin in the distance. Aha! Cora Belle's loud voice echoed from somewhere close to the cabin. She must have taken a quicker path on foot and had reached the cabin. Elias breathed a sigh of relief. Cora hadn't abandoned him. She was merely executing her plan to confuse Kincaid's men and finish her task quickly. Elias fired his pistol at the second man who was trying to creep out from the snow cover. He fell. Now only one remained who was firing at him. "Your game is over!" Elias shouted. At Amelia's cabin, as the snowfall had almost stopped, Elias saw Cora Belle standing near the door, holding a small child in her arms. The girl was about 5 years old, her eyes just like Elias's sister. "She is safe," Cora said, holding the child. "I used the lawyer's message to ensure she stayed put here." "And the map?" Elias asked, with a trace of suspicion. Cora Belle pointed to the leather bag placed behind her. Elias's map tube was intact. "I kept my bargain, Mr. Thorne. Your niece is safe. Now my money." Elias took the $1,000 from his pocket and handed the notes to Cora. Cora quickly counted the money and tucked it into her coat pocket. "Kincaid's men will return," Elias warned. "You should leave this place." "I will," Cora said, handing the child to Elias. "You take the sleigh south, toward the border. I will take this path and confuse the rest of Kincaid's men." Elias bundled Amelia inside his warm coat. The child looked up at him with steady eyes, as if she knew this rugged man was her only hope. Cora Belle, rifle slung over her shoulder, walked away into the snow-covered darkness. She never looked back. She was a mysterious stranger who came on a storm-ridden night, saved a life, and walked her own path. Elias Thorne, who only believed in rocks and maps, now held an unexpected niece in his arms, and within him a strange feeling. The warmth of human connection had entered him for the first time through the wailing storm. That night, a new love and responsibility was born in the heart of a hardened man in the Montana Territory. The next morning, as the sun shone on the snow, Elias and Amelia began their journey toward the Canadian border. Elias realizing that the most important treasure in his life was no longer his maps, but the little girl in his arms for whom he had risked his entire fortune.